Today's scripture comes from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 10, verses 40 through 42. Today we are reading from the Voice translation of the Bible. Anyone who welcomes you welcomes me, and anyone who welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. Anyone who welcomes a prophet and surrenders to his prophecy will receive a prophet's reward. And anyone who welcomes a righteous person and conforms to the righteousness that surrounds him and proceeds from him will receive a righteous man's reward. And anyone who is given so much as a cup of cold water to one of the little ones, because he is my disciple, I tell you, that person will be rewarded. The quote for today comes from Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa was a Catholic nun and missionary who devoted her life to serving the poorest of the poor in Calcutta, India. She said, "Do small things with great love."
Morgan talked about Elsa and letting it go, and I'm trying to let go that I didn't wear a stole today. I don't have that fancy cloth thing over, so I feel a little bit weird. Just gotta let it go, let it go. So we all know that saying, you can't take it with you, right? And I've sort of been trying to look into where this phrase comes from, and I saw that it is from one place is a title of a movie called, surprisingly, You Can't Take It With You, from 1936. And I wanted to be cool. I wanted to include a clip from it, but I watched it for like a half an hour, and I thought, this does not go with what I'm trying to do here. So I did not include anything, but it was kind of an entertaining movie. You might check it out. This is a phrase, you can't take it with you, that has been talked about at length by philosophers like Epicurus and the Stoics. And it finds a place in our own scriptures as well. In the book of Job, it says, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return." You can't take it with you. And yet as humans, we kind of have a knack for clinging, right? We hoard things. We want to keep things. For me, it's, maybe video games and books and baseball cards. Other people, it might be stacks of unread books and all of that. But it's not just things, is it? We hoard and cling to old grudges, to worries that keep us awake in the night, frustrations, anxieties, disappointments. I remember when I was about 6 years old and I was visiting my grandparents' house in Mankato, Minnesota, and I always slept in the same room when we visited. And on this particular day, I have about 25 cousins, and several of the girl cousins were in my room. They were where I was supposed to be, and they wouldn't let me in. And I either wanted to get something or I wanted to spend time with my cousins or whatever, and so I kept knocking on the door, and one of my cousins came and she said, "We don't want you here." And boy, I am 43 years old, and for some reason that just sticks with me. Whew. So maybe there are memories that you've been holding on to, and they don't maybe entirely seem rational. I mean, that happened when I was 6 years old. I'm, not really bothered by it, but maybe at some level, I still am a little bit. But you see, all that clinging weighs us down. The more that we try to carry, the less free we feel. Sometimes the most spiritual practices may seem simple, but they're actually really hard. Letting go, right? Let it go, let it go. Let's just sing the song together. I want to sing it. Letting go of what we refuse to let go of is hard. Old ideas, old patterns, old limitations, disagreements and hurts. Easy to say, hard to do. And often we judge ourselves for how we are feeling. We blame ourselves, shame ourselves, rather than simply welcoming what is there, recognizing that our feelings, our thoughts, our emotions, they all have a place. And so far this month in our Summer Soul series, we've looked at resting and noticing. And today we are looking at a third practice, welcoming what might be uncomfortable for us. Which makes me wonder, what might it be like for you to welcome the very things that you want to push away? To say that even this belongs. What if our anger, griefs, disappointments, and worries were not enemies to conquer, but visitors to greet at the door? And that's what Thomas Keating's welcoming prayer invites us to do, to meet our emotions, however uncomfortable, with these simple words: welcome, welcome, welcome. It doesn't mean that we have to always like what is happening. It doesn't mean we resign ourselves to a life of suffering. But it means that we trust that God is present even in what we resist, and that welcoming what is real is the first step toward being transformed by it. If you've ever had any experience with a 12-step program, the very first step is to acknowledge that there is something there that we need help with, that we are powerless over. And it's that first step that leads to transformation. But we're not very good at this, right? Americans generally, we tend to push things away, or we tend to think that if we push it far enough away or deep enough down, that it will just go away. And that, raise your hands if that has ever happened to you, right? It doesn't just go away, even if you try to do that. What is required is a willingness to be open to change. And the hospitality of others. One of the things I've noticed is that in those moments when I really need help, somebody shows up for me. Somebody says, I'm here for you. In Jesus' day, hospitality wasn't just good manners, it was survival. Travelers depended on the generosity of strangers for food and water, for a listening ear, and for shelter. And so when Jesus says, whoever welcomes you welcomes me, he's naming something real and big. To open your door to a weary traveler isn't just kindness, it's an act of faith. And to withhold hospitality is to close yourself off to God's presence. In the time of Jesus, even the smallest gestures like offering a cup of cold water or sitting by the well with a listening ear carried deep significance. Hospitality in the first century was about letting go of suspicion, letting go of fear, letting go of your right to absolute control over your things, your water, your food, your blankets, and giving those away so that someone else might live. And this is what Thomas Keating's prayer teaches us as well, to welcome, to give ourselves that sense of belonging. And we don't welcome because life is always pleasant. We welcome because God is present, even in the hard places. The prayer calls us to let go of our attachment to security, our need for control, our demand that things will always go our way. In other words, the practice of welcome, whether inward or outward, involves release. We cannot welcome someone new if our hearts and hands are already too full. We cannot welcome the next chapter at our church or in our own lives if we are unwilling to do the hard work of welcoming, the hard work of honestly facing the tough stuff that has to come and allowing its space to be heard. But when we do listen, when things get said, when things get aired out, it takes the fear out of it, and it allows us to let it go. This is a quick story. I didn't write this, but you may have heard a similar variation before. Clara was an older woman who had grown lonely after her husband died, and she had stopped answering the door to her home, had become tired of small talk and wary of strangers. And one evening, there was a knock at her door, and a young man's voice said, please, I need help. And she was pretty nervous, but she decided, after thinking about what might happen with her own son needing help and knocking at a door, she decided to open the door. And what led was a conversation. He needed gas, and she called someone. And in the meantime, they just had a talk. She gave him some food, let him sit by the fire, and just took care of him for a while. And as he left, he said, thank you. I obviously needed much more than just this can of gas. I needed connection. I needed a friend, and you offered that to me. And that changed not only him, but also Clara. Now, this might be kind of a cheesy story, or you may have heard a variation on this before, but I do think it holds some lessons about welcoming in what at first seems frightening or uncertain. And that's the mystery of hospitality. Because when we welcome others, we are welcoming Christ. When we let go of fear and control and clinging, we make space for God's presence. This reminds me of a poem by Rumi, which I know I have read this poem here before, and you may have heard it other places. It's Rumi's poem, The Guest House. And he says, "This being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond." Jesus reminds us that even a small act, a smile, a cup of water, an open door, has echoes in our lives. None of it is wasted. And so this week I invite you to two practices. One is to pray Keating's words, and we're going to make sure this week that in our emails and on social media that we give you the text of the welcoming prayer so you can read it and reflect on it every day this week. So pray those words. Welcome the unknown. Welcome God, however God might appear for you this week. And the second thing that I'm going to ask you to do is to release one thing that you are clinging to, whether that is something really big, like a regret or a disappointment or shame, or something really small, like a cluttered drawer. Just create a little space in your life and in your heart so that God's welcome takes root within you. In the end, hospitality is not something we offer simply to others, it's something we offer to ourselves, because it's who we are called to be. A people who, in welcoming others and in welcoming us just as we are, can welcome Christ. Amen.